What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we are talking about a deck I am very excited about. It's an Amethyst Steel list that I've been messing around with for a while. You guys know I love to innovate in certain colors more than others. Amethyst Steel has been a pet project of mine for the last couple sets that I've really been enjoying. I was a big Amethyst Ruby player for many sets, and as time has moved forward, the way Amethyst Ruby has shaken out in the current meta isn't a build that I'm in love with, but Amethyst Steel has become something that I really enjoy, and I really enjoy taking it a different route than you typically see. So we'll be talking about that, breaking that down as we go. My kind of glass cannon deck list. This deck list was undefeated last time I played it. Played against all meta stuff, so it's got very good meta matchups, and I think that is obviously super relevant if it's a deck that you're thinking about playing seriously in a tournament. Before we jump into talking about that, as always, a big shout out to the Patreons for making the giveaways on the channel possible. Could not do any of this stuff without you guys. I think we're like 70-ish subscribers away from 3,000 in another giveaway, so if you want to push that into reality, definitely make sure you're slapping that subscribe button if you haven't already. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about today's Amethyst Steel Glass Cannon deck list. So the first card in the 1-drop slot is going to be for Diablo Obedient Raven, a 1-cost inkable 0/1 stat line questing for 1. When this character is banished, you may draw a card. Obviously just fantastic on his own, always going to be replacing himself, but can be even better when we start comparing him with some of the other stuff in the deck, and he's a great way to just keep your hand full at the beginning of the game. Something you don't see every day but has seen a little bit more meta play is going to be for Mickey Food Fight Defender, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1 with resist 1. Obviously this is a meta call. If you're not playing against a lot of steel decks in your area, maybe go with something like Broom in this slot. However, if you're playing a lot of steel, I've heard somebody say they played in the top cut for a set championship, and every matchup they went against was Steel Song. So obviously there's a lot of Steel Song out there. If you're playing against a lot of steel, Mickey Mouse Food Fight Defender is your absolute best 1-drop in the deck. Resist just keeps them alive to so many things in the early game and is very annoying for your opponent. Next up, we have 3 Chernobog's Followers, Creatures of Evil, a 1-cost inkable 2/1 stat line questing for 1, and when he quests, he does have the option to go ahead and banish himself to draw you a card. Obviously, if you have any opposing threats on the board, that's when you want to be able to go ahead and trigger that. If there's no opposing threats, maybe you don't worry about it. Next up, and our last card in the 1-drop slot, a card I love, a card that not everybody plays, is going to be for Fire the Cannons, a 1-cost uninkable action, deal 2 damage to chosen character. I think this is a fantastic card in the meta right now. There are definitely some of those resistant threats out there, but this is just a great card. A lot of people are like, oh, you know, characters don't have 2 willpower. There's a lot of bigger willpower characters out there. You start looking at even some of those bigger willpower characters, once they've taken out an opposing threat, Fire the Cannons can be very good. I cannot tell you how many matchups with this deck I've had somebody use their Maui Half Shark to take out one of my characters. Their Maui Half Shark takes 3 damage, and I fire the cannons that thing off of the board. Same thing with so many other potential threats, and it's very good. Again, jumping back to that Steel Song matchup, if they're going turn 1 Cinderella, having a Fire the Cannons in your hand feels real nice. Jumping over to the 2-cost slot, we are on for Mr Sme Bumbling Mates, a 2-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 2. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted and you don't have a captain character in play, deal 1 damage to this character. So he is going to potentially be dealing some damage to himself, which is okay. He is going to be questing for 2, which is fantastic to keep that lore pressure on your opponent and potentially make them take a trade that isn't the most favorable to them. Really have to worry about him, and they may want to be looking to take him off the board very early. Once they've used their direct removal to get rid of those Smees and maybe some of those 1-drop characters if they needed to, that's when you want to go ahead and start getting your Raja Ghostly Tigers down to just continue to threaten the board. He is a 2-cost inkable 3/3 stat line, same as Smee. He only quests for 1 and not for 2, but again, he's more to threaten the board than to get you that lore. However, he can definitely just be questing in while your opponent is being forced to continue to take challenges while getting their characters banished. He does have the ability Vanish, so if he is targeted by an opposing action, he is going to get banished, but that's not going to trigger off of abilities, and it's not going to trigger off of things like Grab Your Swords that deal damage to everything. It's only going to trigger if he's specifically targeted. Our last character in the 2-drop slot, we do have for Calhoun Marine Sergeant, a 2-cost uninkable 3/2 stat line questing for 1 with resist +1, and during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you're going to go ahead and gain 2 lore, which is an absolutely fantastic ability to keep your foot on the gas. You're not only dealing with your opponent's board, but you're gaining lore while you're doing it. Next up, and perhaps the prettiest enchanted in set 7, we have 4 Show Me More, a 2-cost uninkable action that's just going to let both players draw 3 cards. For 2 ink, even if your opponent is also drawing 3 cards, being able to draw 3 cards is super good with this deck. I know not everyone understands the potential of a card like Show Me More, but what's going to make Show Me More really super good is just the fact that you're going to have a higher value proposition off of your cards than your opponent is. And what does that mean? It means they may be getting higher cost cards that they can't play as quickly, or they're getting cards that are the same cost as your cards but don't have the same strength and willpower to be able to threaten the board in the same way. So that's the whole concept of this deck, and it makes Show Me More really super good. Kind of in the same vein as something like Show Me More that's drawing both people cards, we do have 4 Amethyst Chromacons, a 2-cost inkable item. Each player goes ahead and draws a card when you exert it. It is a May ability, so your opponent can choose to decline this, and believe it or not, in 2 out of the 3 matchups that I played, because my opponent, what you want to do is let your opponent generate their own card advantage first before you start giving them additional cards, because then they're just going to end up bogged down with cards that they can't use. So once they start getting that card advantage over you, start giving them those extra cards, and what ends up happening is your opponent gets to a point where they've drawn so many cards that they may actually start declining Amethyst Chromacon triggers because they become concerned about decking themselves. So Amethyst Chromacon, great way to keep the pressure on. You get a few of these on the board, and you're potentially able to draw 3 or 4 cards a turn and just absolutely dominate the board state. One of those cards that's going to let you continue to dominate the board state is going to be 3 Giant Cobra Ghostly Serpent, a 3-cost inkable 4/4 stat line questing for 1 with Vanish. Just like those Rajas, if he's targeted, he is going to be banished. When you play this character, you may choose and discard a card to gain 2 lore. So that's going to be super good, especially when you start looking at bouncing him back to your hand and potentially taking advantage of that multiple times. Obviously, we're not playing those Mim Snakes, but we are playing my favorite Mim in this deck, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Speaking of cards that are great targets for those Mims, we do have 3 Pete Games Referee, a 3-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1 with when you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. Gonna shut off those B prep, shut off those Whole New World, shut off those Grab Your Swords, shut off any of that direct removal. So if you're into that last few lore of the game especially, and you just need to get over that final line, you put your opponent in the position where their only option is to take challenges, especially with the stat lines of the characters in this deck. It's not going to be good for them. And then again, you can just bounce cycle the Pete's if you have the cards available. Deck is definitely heavy on the 3 cost, but it's got a lot of low cost characters in general. We do have 3 Merlin Crabs, a 3-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1 with when you play this character and when he leaves play, chosen character gains Challenger +3 this turn. Obviously fantastic into any targets. It's really good when you look at something like those Diablos in the early game that are a 0/1. All of a sudden you give them +3 after your opponent's left them on the board, and you're going to be able to take a potentially favorable challenge with them and get that card draw. But it's great for pumping up any of those cards, and it goes on the return trigger as well, so really good with those foxes. Next up, we have 3 Gustav the Giant Terror of the Kingdom, a 3-cost inkable 6/6 stat line. This character enters play exerted and can't ready at the start of your turn. During your turn, whenever one of your other characters banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character, and yes, you may do that multiple times a turn, which results in you being able to challenge with him multiple times per turn. There's not any songs in this deck, but if you're ever playing a deck with songs and Gustav, he can also sing multiple times in a turn if you're able to get him ready with those favorable challenges. But obviously he is more of a beat stick, so you're going to want to be challenging with him over singing with him. But if it's something you ever need to do, it is possible if you're playing something like Friends on the other side, or some of those damage spells like Let the Storm Rage On and Strength of a Raging Fire. But he is just really good. I've had so many instances where I'm like turn to Raja or Sme or Calhoun, and it's a very aggressive board threat with that 3 strength that's going to be able to challenge and take out a lot of my opponent's characters. And then all of a sudden going into turn 3, they're not expecting it, but I throw down that Gustav, I take that favorable challenge with something like my Sme or my Calhoun, ready my Gustav. Obviously he can't challenge or do anything else the turn that he comes into play because he's still drying, but you are sitting there with a 6/6 readied threat on the board if your opponent decides that they want to take any challenges or try to do anything. Continuing with that theme of just intimidating your opponent with the characters that you're playing, this is one that may not look intimidating at first sight, but the reality of a possible shift when you play Tinkerbell Fast Flyer is not something that your opponent can ignore if they're smart. Tinkerbell Fast Flyer is a 3-cost inkable 1/3 stat line questing for 2 with evasive, so she's going to be very good not only for questing on her own, but again as that potential shift target. And she's inkable, so if she's in a matchup where she's not as good, ink her up real nice. Last card in the 3-cost slot, one we've touched on a few times, is that Madam Mim Fox, a 3-cost inkable 4/3 stat line questing for 1 with when you play this character, banish her or return another chosen character of yours to your hand. So Madam Mim, super good, still good, gonna stay good. I really hope this is a card that they choose to reprint. I could understand them choosing not to do that, but this is the heart and soul of Ruby Amethyst and so many other decks that run Amethyst, is the potential multi-play triggers with something like Fox. I know it's super good, so maybe we don't see Fox get reprinted, but it's a card that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm hoping for it. I know the creator of Lorcana has also said on multiple occasions that he's a big fan of the franchise, so maybe. Next up, we have 2 Earth Giant Living Mountain, a 4-cost inkable 4/5 stat line questing for 2 with when you play this character, each opponent draws a card. Again, if your opponent has a ton of cards they can't play as fast as you're playing your cards, it doesn't matter. So getting a 4/5 that quests for 2 down on turn 4 can be really scary for your opponent, and there's not a lot of removal that's going to deal with a lot of those threats like Earth Giant, Gustav, those big guys. Our 1 card in the 5-cost slot is going to be 1 Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, a 5-cost inkable 2/3 stat line questing for 2. Not probably ever going to get to quest with this card. She is a kind of blitz play. That's the reason there's only 1 in the deck. If you're in the right situation, which is entirely possible with this deck, she can be really good. She has 2 abilities. Whenever she quests, you draw a card. If you get around to questing with her, obviously that's going to be good. If she dies before she quests, fine. What we're more concerned about in this deck is her second ability. During your turn, whenever you draw a card, you may move 1 damage counter from chosen character to chosen opposing character. So if you throw her down with 2 or 3 Chromacons on the board, or you're going into that turn 7, which, trust me, because you're controlling the board so much, happens a lot with this deck, and you have that 7 ink available because you've been drawing a ton of cards. Maybe you have a Show Me More in your hand, so you throw down that Maleficent, throw down a Show Me More, and immediately move 3 damage. It's worth noting, whenever you draw a card, you may move 1 damage counter from chosen character to chosen opposing character, so you're drawing 3 cards. You're able to remove each of those damage counters individually. It's not like playing a Bell where you have to move them all from the same character. And also on those Amethyst Chromacons, again, you can move that damage each by itself, so you can move it all over the place, get those kind of cheeky targets, which is pretty cool. Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, definitely not good in most Amethyst decks, but in this deck where you have things like Amethyst Chromacon and Show Me More, all of a sudden this card becomes very playable. And the last card in the deck in the 6-drop slot, we are on 2 Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, a 6-cost inkable 4/5 stat line questing for 2 with shift 4. So again, you get down those fast flyers on turn 3, threatens the possibility of a shift tank on turn 4, which your opponent is not going to want to let you do. And when you play this character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. It's all good and well. It's less of a relevant ability than it used to be, but we know this card's getting reprinted and fabled, so it may be a great time to buy into these, especially post-rotation. This card can become really good again. It was very good when the game was fresh and new. What's really good is if you're shifting this character, you can go ahead and challenge with her immediately, and during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may deal 2 damage to chosen opposing character. So you're potentially able to get a 2-for-1 when you challenge in with her, which makes Tinkerbell Fast Flyer one of the best cards in the game, and a card that has continued to remain very popular. So that is the breakdown on Amethyst Steel Glass Cannon. It's a deck list that I feel really good about. If you're curious, my matchups when I played it were into Amethyst Emerald, kind of discard bounce control shenanigans, into a Steel Song deck, and I also played against Ruby Amethyst, and like I mentioned, I did go undefeated. I think the deck list is super good. I think it's something that people need to look at a little more deeply and really practice playing, because the play lines aren't necessarily always obvious, but once you get used to playing the deck list and not giving your opponent card advantage when it's the wrong time and focusing on trying to do those plays at the correct moment in the game, the deck list all of a sudden becomes really good, and your opponents typically don't know how to play around it because they're not expecting things like Gustav and Earth Giant and Raja. Raja, particularly in the Amethyst Ruby matchup, was pretty crazy because they have no good way to deal with it outside of challenging, and most of their characters die to it, or they challenge it with something like a Maui and they survive, but all of a sudden they're in range of your fire, the cannons. So it's a really super interesting matchup, definitely a back and forth, but eventually I was able to take them down. But let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. I always love to hear what what you have to say. If you're playing a deck list that's similar, that would be crazy, but I would love to hear about it. And when you see those toys, video games, and giant Tinkerbells and cool Maleficents off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.